Welcome to Camera Ready and Abel, the podcast that explores the intersection of media change and personal growth. I'm your host, Barbara Abel, and my calling is to help you tap into your superpowers to thrive on camera and in life, and to make an impact on the world. This episode is brought to you by the phrase, how to talk to anyone, which, by the way, gets 455 million hits on Google. Humans are social creatures, and yet it can be mighty hard to talk to people. So here to discuss is my dear friend, Crystal Jones, who is the Associate Director of Major Gifts for the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and who talks to people all day, every day for a living, and talks them into making serious donations. Yes, this is in fact a superpower and a gift. Crystal and I have been friends since our Scripps College days, and I seriously refer to her as the universal guest because you can seat Crystal literally next to anyone in the world, and that person will have a wonderful time. Crystal says the key to talking to anybody and building relationships is shared values, strategy, and integrity. I am all ears. Welcome to the podcast, Crystal.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, Barbie.
Oh, see, I love. Hey, by the way, I'm dating the podcast, but it is Barbie release day. So yes, and so that's how long Crystal and I have known each other. She's gets to call me Barbie. Okay, the cat's out of the bag, but I really want to go back and talk to you now about your superpower. Were you always able to talk to anybody?
So I think what when I think about that, Barbie, what I think about is, I don't know if I was always able to talk to anybody, but I always had the desire to talk to whoever was around, and also to not be intimidated to talk to anyone. That's where my motivation to talk to people came from. So I think that that's really, kind of where I think about starting. And I don't know if I'm able to talk to anyone, but I always want to be able to talk to anyone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I want to talk more about the distinction.
I think that has to do with one of the things that you talk about is you claimed this ability as a superpower. Well, in the world that we live in, the superpowers belong to superheroes, right? And superheroes have origin stories. Let's just go there.
Oh, you are making my day. I knew I had to talk to you about this. Keep going, love. Didn't mean to interrupt.
And so my origin story, as with all of ours, starts with my childhood, right? Growing up, I grew up in my parents, my parental unit, we moved in with my father's sister and her husband and his younger sister. So two sisters and a husband. And so I was this little child living with all of these adults. And my uncle was going to Chapman College at the time. He was from the Congo, and he would bring his friends over and they would party and they were really sweet to me as a little kid. And so I was this only child living with all of these adults. And that was my childhood. And sometimes I would be spotted off in the corner with an adult person, just talking and having this really great conversation. And so I think that, what that gave me was the ability to understand. I was talking to people that had all this life experience and who had vocabulary. And so I got that from them, and that made me, I think, kind of interesting, because I would be responsive in my conversations with other people and be able to, say, oh, yes, I know about that because I had, picked it up from someone else. But it really came from being an only child and wanting to connect, and my parents not being able to fulfill all of my communication and emotional needs and verbal needs, about those. And so having to look for them in other places. And so I think that that's what gave me this desire and comfort level to talk to anyone.
I think it's significant because no one was telling you to be quiet.
Yeah, no one was telling me to be quiet. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I think probably then we couple that with a really wonderful, healthy curiosity and an interest in the world.
Yes, that's right. I think that I love that you said that, because I think that that's what that inspired, was a curiosity more so about people and their inner workings.
Has there ever been a time when you were tongue-tied?
Yeah, tongue-tied. I don't know about tongue-tied,
Okay.
but there have been times when I've been incredibly disappointed at what I call people's limited humanity. And
Oh,
yeah,
describe.
well, for the listeners who maybe can't tell, I'm African American woman, and being in the fundraising field, especially my majority of my work has been at predominantly white institutions, and so a lot of the donors that I've had to interact with have also been white, and that there's a couple of very wealthy and have lived a certain life. And one time I was on the phone, I was in Santa Barbara working for one of these small liberal arts colleges that I worked for. And I called the woman to make sure that she was ready for my appointment. And she said, well, I don't know, I'm not feeling too well. What are you coming to talk to me about? And I said, well, I'm a major gifts officer, so I'm in fundraising. So I'm coming to talk about some of the needs of the college. And she said, oh, are you raising money for all of those unqualified little Black kids? And I said, well, first of all, I was taken aback. Unfortunately, not stunned, but taken aback. And I said, well, I'm African American, and we don't accept students who are not qualified. And she said, oh, well, I love the Mexicans, and so that was really disappointing and sad to me that would be so easy for her to say. But what I really appreciated was that I was like, oh, look, I'm Black. Don't, you can't, FYI, and also we do not accept, what I responded, I was really proud of. Another time that happened recently, I was in the concert hall where I work, and I went to say hello to a donor, and she was kind of sitting a little bit above me, and I was standing below her, and she was happy to see me, and she looked out and she was smiling. She said, oh, it's so good to see you. And she reached out her hand and touched my hair like she was petting a pet. Mm-hmm. And and it's the third time that it's ever happened to me in my career in fundraising. And so, and I just kept on talking about what I was talking to her about, and I didn't know how to address it, and I went and sat down to view the concert, and I was feeling so many different feelings inside: mortified, anger, deep anger. And then I said, oh, I'm going to ask her for $500,000. And in 2 weeks, I set up a meeting to ask her for $500,000. She did not. She eventually told me she wasn't able to do it, but it just felt like that's the way I was turning it around. But a couple of times that I've been tongue-tied that are a little bit more fun than that are with celebrities. I just have to say, just full disclosure. I think this, Barbie. I'm a little starstruck, not only for celebrities, but for intellectuals. and so a couple of times I've been in the company of folks that I really admired. And early in my career, I had the pleasure of working with Vanessa Williams and Babyface when I worked for Ramon Hervey. That was in our early days in the entertainment industry. You remember that. Mm-hmm. And I asked Vanessa, I said, Vanessa, when people come up to you and say how much they like you, what do you want us to say? And she said, you can just say, I really like your work. And so that's what I try to do now when I feel that tongue-tiedness coming on.
I want to go back for a second, Crystal, just to say thank you for your intense vulnerability there. And it actually also beautifully shifted the conversation to not where you start when you think about like how to talk to anybody, but literally you just demonstrated how to talk to anyone when you are put in such a difficult situation where you're not generating the conversation, you're reacting to, you know, hateful, hurtful language. So can we sit with that for a second? I want to figure out like how you learn, because one of the things you're doing, you are responding instead of reacting.
Yes.
So again, has that always just been part of you, or do you remember like, or can just to help for people listening to get to that place where, because you did that in real time, you know, on the
Yes.
phone, and then the second time it was still real time-ish in the sense you just needed a few moments to work
Yeah.
through. So what are your skill sets around responding instead of reacting so you can continue to talk to anyone, stand in your own integrity?
What I really appreciate about your podcast, and that took me by surprise when you shared with me that you were doing this, and the podcasts that I've listened to have incorporated integrated this so beautifully, is the personal growth part. Because I mean, for us to just live and enjoy and have joy in this life, we have to, I believe, you know, that's one of my values, is that you have to do the inner work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Thank you.
sometimes it's yes. And sometimes it's kind of foisted upon you. And other times you can kind of just freely decide that you're going to do it. But whatever, you got to do it. You know, it's critical. One of the things that is critical to good communication and to being able to talk to anyone is being able to active listen, you know, be an active listener. I've learned this just through my own personal journey with a lot of things that I've wanted to overcome, anxiety that I wanted to overcome, and just fear. I mean, raising money does not come naturally to me. Building relationships does, but not talking to people about their hard-earned money and about what they want to do with it. So, you know, to get over that, I have had to utilize a lot of my, you know, I mean, I have a therapist and I do yoga and I do, like we just talked about, our morning walks, and I walk a lot of times without earphones, just me and nature or the cars on the street, you know, and just kind of going inside. And the thing that has allowed me to respond is because I do kind of take this stance. I'm very grounded in the moment in myself, which takes work. It's not like I'm just always grounded, but it takes intentionality. And I'm in a listening mode with all of my body. And so that is really, I think, you know, a kind of a window into my, or not a window, but something that I start with, like my foundation. And also, there was something, you know, communication isn't just about speaking, right? So I mean, that goes with the active listening. Karen Osborne, who is a very well-known and beloved fundraiser in the field. She has her own firm and she's also an author. She writes these really great mystery novels. And when we'd go to conferences for fundraising, one of her sessions was active listening. And it's really learning how to listen. And, you know, just listening to people and not saying anything until they finish is a serious skill, and it is a practice. I mean, you know, that's what you're doing in this podcast. So that commitment to active listening and also being grounded in who you are and having to practice that every morning, you know, practice grounding. I do a gratitude list every morning that grounds me in the day. And sometimes I think about, you know, what do I want this day to look like? If I have an interaction, I want the interaction to move forward with ease, you know, and just being really intentional kind of about my approach.
Now I want to pick up on the part about building relationships, which you said comes naturally to you. And it's such an important theme in the podcast because many people in the performing side have, especially in the last year, have talked so much about that was the relationships that got them the next job or propelled them forward, or focusing on the relationship and the energy that you get from thinking that way instead of about getting the gig or making is that change in energy. And for lack of the better, but it's like a win-win. We're in this together. There's a lot of, you know, empathy and connection that way. I don't even know how I was supposed to end that sentence, but I want to go back because you just said the same thing. So that how does your natural ability to build relationships, and we could talk about, because you define, I mentioned that in the introduction, how you define that, but how that has allowed you into separating people from not little gifts. Let's go back to your title, major gifts.
So one of the critical parts, critical things to talking to anyone, especially with some of the folks that might be listening, these are going to be conversations that are professional, or that we are having conversations with people for strategic reasons, right? And it's really helpful to do as much research as you can on folks before you interact with them. And Google them, find out something about them. And if there's nothing about them that you can find out, then you have to kind of start off with questions. It's a lot of curiosity. And you have to also be ready when you're talking to major gifts folks. I'm going to give you an example. In one of the jobs that I've had, small liberal arts college, one of the donors that I had been trying to get in touch with was one of the 7 founding members of Microsoft. He and Bill Gates went to high school together, and this gentleman's child went to the institution where I worked and had graduated. And this gentleman had been incredibly generous throughout the years to the institution where I worked. And I wanted to see if I could meet him and ask him to give even more, because we were having some initiatives that we wanted to raise money for. And I emailed him several times, wrote him handwritten notes, and called his assistant. And I talked to people in the city where he lived who said, oh yes, he's really lovely, he's just busy, you should continue to try to get in touch with him. Well, one day I got an email from him and he said, I'll be in town when you're here. Would you like to go to this sports event? Because he was the owner of a team. And I said, yes, thank you so much. And that was all his email after all of these attempts. And so I went up to the city where I was, and he picked me up. And as soon as we got in the car, he said, so how can I help you? And I said, well, we're raising money for a residence hall, and we need $9.5 million. And he said, well, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm ready for that, but maybe we can talk about some other things. And I was ready with that ask because I had had so many conversations with people before, or a couple where people said, so how can I help you? And I was like, oh, I didn't realize they were going to ask me so soon, because I was spending so much time trying to connect with them on their values and learn, when you grew up, what did you grow up with a philanthropic value? Did your parents give? Is that where you learned to give? And with this gentleman, he was just right to the point. And I said, and I knew that I had 5 hours with him, so we could explore all of that. So that's, kind of an interesting situation. But it really is, researching these people, finding out if they have given in other places. And, there's pretty much something about everyone on Google. And then it's, when I'm sitting with them, if I have the pleasure, we'd never done Zoom before the pandemic. So most of my interactions with people were face-to-face. And I was able to kind of tune into their energy. And that is one thing that is one of my skills, and is I'm pretty empathetic. And so sitting with people and just kind of gauging where they are. And sometimes people will say, well, tell me what you need. And I start rattling, but I might say a couple of things and then say, how does that resonate with you, to enter into the conversation? And then I begin to pull out from them what their values are. But I'm always really intrigued with starting with, this is saying to people, I'm a fundraiser, but these relationships are business, but they're also friendly and social. And so I'd love to know how you became interested in this organization, or what do you value about this organization, or with working at the LA Phil, what makes your heart sing about music. So some key questions just about them and their connection to the organization, which allows me to then kind of go on the road about what their values might be.
Wow. Okay. This is such a gift, because for anyone listening, and you may not have thought of this, Crystal, and and sort of my secret agenda here, but this is what people have to do when they go for funding for their project. When you're looking for money for your film or your TV show or your play, or to invest in your business at whatever stage, these are the same set of skills, and you've just delivered a masterclass. And there are a lot of things that I joke about. One, it's the core value for me, or message, is goal, audience, platform. So you know what your goal is, but you have to really get specific about who your audience is and what the platform is. So in your case, you had, this one gajillionaire sports team owner, and the platform was 5 hours one-on-one, right? And so it's like, how do I communicate with this person? And then the other truth that you just shared is it tends to be the wealthier, cut to the, because they don't have time. You got 15 minutes a lot of times. I mean, you're like, you had 5 hours, right? Yeah. But the other thing I actually also want to say that I've learned from other founders that you made very clear, but I think some people miss when they're going to raise money for a project or the film business, that it is a relationship. I'm asking for a check, but it's like, because if you're going to fund my business, we're kind of going to be in some kind of like, yes, multiple marriage now for like 5 years. Like, so there has to be a relationship. And the same thing, if you're funding my movie and you want to have any interest or little say so into what happens with that, we have to understand it's like, what kind of relationship. And I so appreciate you addressing that, and then helping and actually giving some people tools to like how to ask those questions, even in that, when you have a brief conversation, that it's not necessarily just hit play and do or do your spiel.
Oh, yes. One of the things that makes me think about is a lot of people ask me to consult with them about how to have a conversation with a donor about a certain thing, funding opportunity, or to engage their donors with things. And it's really about that individual tailored experience. And in this case, about the success of the organization. And but just by the way, he 18 months later, he committed to a $500,000 scholarship for the college that I was working for, and he continues to give a 6-figure gift every year to the college. And I've left that college. It's been many years since, so that was kind of a success. And I've had a few of those. But if you are grounded in your integrity, and you are I think humble to the process of getting to know another person, and you are clear about what you want the outcome to be, but you're not tied to the rigidity of how you're going to get to that outcome, right? Then you can give yourself some permission to not, I don't want to say bumble, but to be really present in the way the conversation develops and evolves. And there are times when you can say, this is, you want to be clear, you want to, have a sense of presence and confidence about yourself and about what you are raising money for, and clear, or what you're trying to get support for. But you also really want to be fresh and I don't know, how do I say fresh, but I don't want to overuse, but present in what they have to say, and how that might make you think of something else, and how when you tell them, oh, I didn't think about that, or oh, that makes me think about this, then you're allowing them to educate you, and then that begins that relationship, right? And you also don't just want to hear from them and talk about your organization. You want to share maybe how you personally became connected to this organization. I mean, I think that that's what people in the entertainment business, when they pitch shows, they probably talk about that personal history. But it's important to just as much as we are asking people to, as we are telling people about the project and asking people their opinion, that we share a little bit too, so that that relationship does begin to formulate. Does that make sense?
Oh, honey, this is media coaching 101. I just want to now share this recording with everyone who walks in the door, virtually or real, because what you just said, we've gone full circle and we've come back to active listening, because what you've just talked about is, and this is a really common thing, is we start with, right, we have our talking points, we have our messaging, and we know what we need and want to say. And what you've just helped because so clear on is you have to, that's important, but you have to release the vice-like control that you have and your attachment to that. Because if you're so attached just to your messaging, you're not present, you're not active listening, you're not being able to respond in the moment that's going to allow you get to the result that you want. And you also have to, to your point, relax the timeline a little bit, because I'm a firm believer that it's not a no. It may be just not now, or we have to contemplate or whatever.
Yes.
But because everything is dependent on the exchange of energy and the connection. And so this happens a lot too, by the way. A perfect example, anyone listening, is when you're new to this and you going to be interviewed, or you're excited to finally, get on the morning shows and this and that, and you become so attached to your talking points that you don't actually hear the questions that are asked.
Exactly.
Right. And the audience catches that, by the way, when you answer something that's already been spoken, or you don't quite answer the question. It's just clear that you're not listening.
Yes.
And it's and that's not a win. And that's the thing that, by the way, that I'm going to remember about you.
Yes.
Wow, they seem distracted.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I have had a lot of interview coaching too, because, and so sometimes you do want to strategically take their question and take it in a way and answer something that you want to say, and not necessarily their question.
That too. Well, that's media training 2.0. We call that bridging, or you're just directing the conversation where you want to go. And that's when we get, you're naturally good at this, by that we acknowledge and validate the person who asked the question. That's so interesting. I can understand why you may want to explore this, but I want to kind of direct your attention over here, which I find particularly exciting.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Wait, just for fun, I want to go back to the celebrity intellectual. Who's on your list of people that would, make you go, ooh?
Well, okay, another vulnerable moment. Before he got into any political career, I grew up loving Clint Eastwood. And so the first time I met Clint Eastwood, which was at a William Morris Agency screening of The Unforgiven, I was tongue-tied, and I shook his hand, and then I remember thinking, oh, he doesn't have rough hands. He's not really a horse rider. He's an actor. He's got some really smooth hands. But anyway, Darren Walker, who's the head of the Ford Foundation, I actually met him recently, and I was just, Elizabeth Alexander, head of the Mellon Foundation. She's a little bit of a celebrity that I kind of have, just love being in her presence. And I've been in her presence, and every time I'm like, hi, I met you, and she's always very gracious.
Okay, now I just want to down to brass tacks, going back to how we approach things. How do you write out your Do you write out your strategy? Do you rehearse? Do you practice? Do you, download photos of people and look at them during the Google research? What is the we went from the thought process that you identified, but what are the actual steps you take?
Well, that's a good question. So there's a few different approaches, because there's people that you want to get in touch with that are completely cold. I mean, they're connected to the organization or to the institution some way, but you don't exactly know how. Then there's people that maybe have been giving often, and they've come to a couple events, so they're familiar with the organization. And so that's a different kind of a warm market. And then there's those folks that have been involved in the past at a very big level, and maybe they've kept on the radar, but they don't have an ongoing relationship with them. So there's no one in my work in major gifts, there's no one plan, for all. So with the very cold people that you have very little information on, then that's just a really, I'd love to get to know you. I see you've been involved. I don't necessarily write out a strategy because I've been doing it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But in the beginning, I would always send the plan is to send an email and say, I'm going to follow up. And a lot of times, I mean, this is very valuable information, by the way. This is what people pay me for in my job, but also ask me, like, when I'm, I have quite a few relationships with people at nonprofit organizations, sending an email that says, hey, just floating this to the top of your emails in case it fell through the cracks. I got that actually from a website, So so this, the plan is really to communicate with them kind of passively, and then the phone calls, and then you can say, I've been trying to get in touch with you. You've been generous. We thank you for your support. Always, it's always, you should always thank people for their connection, for making the time to meet with you if you're meeting with them in person, but for thanking them in the past, and for saying, I am working on building relationships that benefit this institution, and then going from there. Someone who has maybe been kind of involved, then it is looking at what they gave to, what interests them, when they came to an event, what type of event it was, and actually asking folks in the institution, because I pretty much work in large institutions, if they've had interactions with them. So the institutional knowledge that might be there, and then putting together a plan. I'm going to reach out to them, about a 3-month plan to try to just reach out to people. A lot of my work is just trying to get people to respond back to you and then to connect with them. So it's
that's the entertainment business in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
Or sales now. This is incredible, Crystal. I mean, one, I'm also hearing that not to take it personally, because when you describe how many times you have to reach out to people, and so that you've built some kind of thicker skin, or however you deal with the fact that you hear a lot of no's on the road to yes. So that's an important message. I also, as you were speaking, I wanted to ask you, do you do anything conscious or unconscious at this point to warm yourself up before you make that phone call?
Yes. I mean, I do. Most of my outreach happens on a Friday, on a Thursday or Friday at the end of the week, when I'm kind of relaxed. And a lot of times it happens then, because that's when I believe people might be looking at their emails over the weekend that are personal and not work related for their job. But yeah, I remember when I was at UCLA, I used to say to myself, they should be so lucky that one of the largest research institutions in the world is calling them to ask them to contribute to putting more research out there for the world. I would literally say that to myself, and then I would make the phone call, so that, those kinds of things. And sometimes just talking to colleagues, one of the things that's a real blessing at a place that's a large institution is that I have the privilege to be surrounded with other people who do work similar to mine, and so I can go into their office and we can have this is the work, Barbie, sometimes a half an hour to an hour conversation about one sentence that we're going to write in an email to someone. The folks that I manage, a lot of times, they come and they ask me a question, and I say, this is going to be about a 20-minute conversation. This is the work. We're not socializing right now. We're talking about the work, and we will talk about what words to use.
Okay, wait, I need to be a fly on this wall. I am so nerding out about this in the best way. So in broad strokes, what are some sort of yes words, or even tenses that we use, or if you can give an example of like how you could, parse a sentence for an hour.
It's not so much those types of semantics necessarily. Yesterday, for instance, my colleague said, "Can you read this email that I'm about to send?" It was like a three small paragraphs. And the question she asked, or what she told them, was she wanted to talk to them about building a relationship with them, and what the impact of giving at this organization helps to increase our artistic endeavors, right? And I said, we want to pull at people's heartstrings, right? Artistic endeavor or artistic operations is a little insider lingo. So we want to say, we want to build the joy of music for, we want to use those emotional words that touch people as much as we think we can. I mean, artistic operations might get someone, to respond. We don't know. So that is also part of a relationship, is trying things out and seeing what resonates and what doesn't resonate. And just because someone doesn't respond that way, then maybe we'll try another way. But until they say, "Do not call me anymore, I am not interested," then we try 7 times before we let it go.
Okay, I could talk to you all day, but now I am going to let you go, Crystal. This has been, again, total masterclass. So generous. You're fantastic. I'm going to be listening to this over and over and over again and sharing it with my students and my clients. Thank you a millionfold. This is amazing. So I thank you, Crystal. Now I want to thank you, the audience, my friends, for listening to Camera Ready and Able. I truly appreciate you. And if you are prepping for your big pitch, I would love to help you. Please shoot me a note via my website, abelintermedia.com, and be sure to download my free ebook, 12 Tips for Success on Camera. And as always, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already.